Right. Okay, it's April 27, 2023, and this is a special Finance Committee meeting to discuss preparations for the budget. Please state your name and your title, starting to my left.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Mike Thorwald, School Board.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Ed Tate, School Board.
Anthony Devlin, Director of Special Services.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Anthony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Al Fong, Director of Secondary Ed. Steve Gomez, School Board.
Christine Taylor, Director of HR.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
And Yontapali School Board, we really have one item on the agenda to review the meeting, and I know it's going to be a lot of discussion. So it's going to be more casual discussion. I'm just going to ask if we can just finish one topic before we jump into the next. So with that, Mr. Tony Rapp.
Thank you. So we put together this presentation for the budget as it currently stands. So the agenda for tonight, as part of this presentation, is we're going to talk about the current status of the budget, what reductions we've made to appropriations in the budget, what adjustments we made to estimated revenues, and then talk about a little bit about where we're going to go from here. You know, whether we need additional adjustments, a tax increase, and then we have a special finance meeting that we have set up for next Thursday to continue this discussion and to kind of update you again on what's going on. We have a regular finance facilities meeting on May 11th, and we need to approve the preliminary final budget by May 18th at the regular school board meeting. Okay. So the summary of the budget where we're at now, the budget maintains the current level of programming and services provided to schools as it is now. Most of the changes that you're going to see fall into one of the two categories. Budget changes that were made to address items that were considered wants, as opposed to keeping things as they were. Other changes were based upon reevaluation of budgeted items, such as we looked at revenues. We have some things we're looking at, like health insurance premiums only, and so that type of thing. We do have some program additions in the budget. This budget will enact a board-approved expansion of the gifted program, so that is in the budget. And at this juncture of the preliminary budget, the only employee employment savings is related to the removal of new positions and savings from replacement of retirement employees. There is nothing that involves someone who currently has a job or anything with those positions. So we're only talking in this budget about some new positions that were budgeted. Some of them were, wants, and then, an employee retires. They obviously are pretty high on the scale, and so they're going to be replaced with someone new who's lower on the scale. And we want to make it clear, this is not, the district hasn't been overspending, so it's not, this imbalance is not a result of overspending. The factors that the increase in the third-party contracts. So this is future spending that we're trying to do to make sure that we get under control. So we're not overspend anything. We followed the budget as best as we could for last year. So we talk about third-party contracts that caused some increases. Obviously, inflation's hitting everyone, and that's affecting what we pay for things. We pay for we're paying more for things, even the school district, and there was some improper prior year budgeting that we discussed, and that leads to some areas where our budget wasn't where it should have been. Any questions on that? So, looking at where we were on April 11th, we were estimating $257 million in revenues, $273,000 in appropriations for an imbalance of $16 million. Since then, we've budgeted an additional $2.4 million in revenue, and we're looking at removing an additional $7.2 million in expenses to reduce that imbalance to $6,327,000. And so, where we're at, if you want to talk about it, so these are the adjustments that we've made so far. So increases in estimated revenues and decreases in appropriations. And net employee retirement savings. This is where I talked about where someone's at top level retiring, get replaced with a new employee. And this is kind of a complicated calculation, because what happens is we have to look at, not just the salary, but all the benefits that are based on salary, like the PSERS rate that we pay, we have to get a certain amount of salary in PSERS. But we also get money back from the state for Social Security and PSERS. So we have to, take that into consideration, that we are going to be reducing revenues a little bit for these positions, for these retirements, and for any of these types of staffing changes. So for Korea, we're looking at $1.3 million in savings, CRESPA, $51,000 in savings, and CRA, $22,000 in savings. And then there, as I said, there were staff that were originally in the budget that are not in the budget now. The net savings from them, once you take out,
Unknown caller.
reimbursements that we'll get from the state. Korea went down to 6.8 FTEs for a savings of 606,000, and CRESPA was 7.0 FTEs for a savings of $469,000. Okay. Any questions or discussion?
Do you want to talk about what these are, or do you want to talk about it later, because since we're on the topic?
The 6.8 was, we were seeking to add 2 ELD teachers due to the large influx of immigrant students that we're experiencing. And Nicole and I have spoken a bit about that is a real need that we have, but they are right now not included in the budget. We did preliminarily budget for 3 elementary teachers as a reserve in the event that sections would increase and we would need those. 1 math specialist, a 0.3 addition to 2 gifted teachers, which equals 0.6 for gifted, and a 0.2 addition to our 1 STEAM teacher, who is 0.8. So that gets you to the 6.8. On the CRESPA side, we had added 3 teacher assistants to the budget. Typically during the school year, we'll send authorizations for new positions for teacher assistants, so we were proactively putting that in on the front end. 2 endpoint technicians to support technology, and 2 security officers. 1 we had designated would serve primarily at night, and the other would be dedicated to the elementary level where we don't have a designated security person. We had discussed but not put into the budget some other additions, such as a cybersecurity manager and a data analyst, but those never were included within the projections. So the 6.8 and the 7 are what has been reduced here.
Any
Sorry.
questions about that?
Yes. Christine, I'm sorry, would you repeat the CRESPA positions? I didn't follow that
So
completely.
3 teacher assistants, 2 endpoint technicians, and 2 security officers.
Thanks.
So these are positions that we would like to have, and in some cases we thought it was necessary, like the security officers, but they're not in this budget. So it's true.
Yeah, I thought we had discussed as many as 7 security guard positions.
7 security guard.
Yes.
We talked about 7 total positions. We talked about 2 security guards that Christine mentioned.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thank you.
And then on the bottom, we have the savings from reduction of healthcare premium. So what we were looking at doing was, we have that healthcare fund balance that's ended in 22, this 22 school year was about $25 million in that fund balance. That's money that's come from premiums paid by employees and premiums paid by the district. We consider that fund balance to be high for what it was. So in order to save money this year, we were looking at reducing premiums by a percentage to basically be able to take, instead of paying money into the fund for that, into the healthcare fund, cover of premiums, we were reducing premiums so that we would have to use $2 million worth of healthcare fund balance to fund healthcare during the year, which would reduce the premium that we would pay in to the healthcare fund during the year by $2 million, which would be a budget reduction. It would also necessitate, and it's only fair because they paid into it too, but it would require the employees to have their premium, the premium that they pay, reduced by the same percentage, but by a percentage to achieve that savings. We spoke with our consultant Gallagher on this matter, and they recommend that we do not go to a $2 million savings in premiums. They're recommending more along the lines of a 4% decrease, which would save us about $1 million in premiums, because you're looking at healthcare trends and saying that in the future, where our healthcare costs are going to go up. You look at pharmacy costs go up about 9% around the country. That increase that we're looking at. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we might actually need some of this to cover it. And if we go down too far on premiums, then we have a really high increase in premiums next year, which is not something that we want to face. So, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. That seems like a very healthy balance in that pot of money for healthcare.
Yes.
And we're self-insured for our healthcare.
Yes.
Does this in any way impact, say, our stop-loss insurance or the money that we need to have in reserve should there be some catastrophic events? By decreasing that money, does that in any way jeopardize that?
Not at the level that we're at. And the stop-loss is completely different. So that's a policy where we're not funding that. We pay a premium on that. It's not as much. But we don't want to. We know that we want to take the fund balance down. The thing is, we need to do it in a measured manner, so that one, we don't overfund the healthcare funding off quickly. We don't want to do that. And on the other end of it, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we and the employees are paying us less of a premium, and then all of a sudden we're required to jack it up by a lot. So if we go down this year by the percentage that we're talking about going down, then next year, if we have to raise rates, we can use some of that fund balance to smooth it out, so we're not jumping from 4% increase this year to a 10%, a 4% decrease this year to a 10% increase next year. So we're trying to avoid that, and that's what our consultants recommended to us. On the other side of it, they're saying that we could take $1 million from this fund and transfer it directly over to the general fund. We're looking into it, doing our due diligence, but I'm probably not going to recommend that. I don't think I don't know that it's very, and I have, I've asked our attorney our solicitor to give me an answer, just so we know whether or not. But so this might affect where the numbers that I showed you earlier, that we might need $11 million somewhere. But right now we're looking at reducing the premiums by $1 million for sure. So, any other questions on that?
You may. Go ahead.
So I'm just following up on Marian's question. So if there is a catastrophic event or that affects many people who are insured, since we're self-insured, how do we have any insurance that will create some kind of protection against like a big catastrophic event? Because If it's a big event, I don't know if it's,
We have a stop loss policy. I think like an
But what
example,
is
we
it?
have, well, basically what it is we have a policy, that once we get to $350,000 on a claim, the stop loss policy kicks in and pays above that. So we're not, you know,
okay, so if that's the case, why can't we reduce the 2 million, make it 3 million? If we have that protection?
well,
That's per claim.
yeah.
No, I
So there could be
understand.
1,000 claims. in
Well,
one
then
year.
it's not enough.
No, that is.
1,000 times 350,000? No, it's
Yeah,
not.
but you know what I'm saying, I mean, that's why we keep that pile there, is because there's always more than one.
And so because things, and I talked about this at the last meeting, we don't know what the normal is now for a lot of things because of COVID. We really don't. So many things have changed, and you know, we're thinking 22 was a normal year, but you know, 23 might be more normal. But until we get some consistent numbers that aren't related to COVID, I think we need to be very careful with that kind of thing. Because you know, we don't want to get blasted out of the water next year. We don't have, and say in 2023, 24, we have a ton of claims, and we've spent more than we did, and then you know, now we're looking at an even bigger increase in premiums next year, and we still would like to be able to use some of this money to smooth it out. So, and we also have to look at, how much money we need to keep in there, and should we go in a different direction, we have to cover that, which is another thing that our consultant explained to us, that they're recommending as a minimum of $15 million in that fund to fund any type of change that we would make in the future. I'm not saying that we're going to, or that obviously that I'm not recommending that, just that if that happens, we need to be able to cover that.
You're talking about joining the healthcare
Well, anything
consortium?
like
Or
that,
you-
anything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, it was a good discussion, but I have a question about 2 million. That is coming from the 25 million fund balance.
Yes. And like I said, it's probably more of 1 million now, so at least the way that I'm looking at it now.
Okay, so that dollar figure represents the cost of the 4% reduction in premiums?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
so 4% reduction in premiums on our end will result in us paying $1 million less
Right.
from the general fund and paying it out of the healthcare fund.
Got it.
It's
Thank
not the
you.
4% reduction, is the premiums will increase 4% and we're going to cover them. It's not that our premiums are going to go down, right?
The premiums that we're paying will go down. But the amount, so our premiums are based on, a couple things. The consultant fees, the administrative fees, and then our actual healthcare, what we're expecting in healthcare. That's what our premiums are based on, and that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's then allocated to the plans and what we should expect to be in those plans. And that's what the premiums are based on. So we get that number. And also keep in mind, we've already looked at the premiums from the perspective of, they are recommending a 4% increase in premium this year. And we're covering that in 2 ways already. So one of the ways is we're administering a new plan where employees who are on high cost medications will register in this group, and then the group will find all the rebates for those plans. And the benefit to us and to the employee is the employee will pay nothing for high cost prescription drugs, and we will have to pay a lesser percentage of those high cost prescription drugs, which will save us money. So that's about half of that increase. And then we already do plan on using another 4%, reducing the premium increase by 2%. So we're keeping a premium increase from happening, and then we're looking at reducing them still, so we can use some of that fund balance to cover it. So we're already kind of using probably $1.5 million already, based on what we've heard from. And again, we're in a position where we think that it's okay to do that because of how much we have, but we don't want to let it get too low, and we do want to be prepared for next year. For the upcoming year. So, okay.
Well, maybe this is for Christine, for some of the new folks, can you ballpark, I don't think they realize, some folks here realize what a high-cost prescription means in a year. Can you ballpark that? I mean, these are shocking in terms of,
Are you referring to a high-cost claimant? Can
Yeah.
be upwards of $1 million.
For prescription.
When Tony and I met with Gallagher recently, we had two, well, this would be inclusive of all of the claims. We had two claimants that were in the 1 million range. Yeah.
it's not a little bit, that's why.
Yeah.
You're talking, one, I think they showed us one drug, and it was like something like, just for the people here that are on, something like $75,000 a year just for one.
For the specialty medications.
For one specialty.
Yeah. We have, I think, 68 individuals on the plan on high-costing specialty medication. So that Prudent RX program that Tony was talking about is going to give us a cost avoidance of around $300,000. And it's also then going to pass over to the employee having that specialty medication at no cost. So right now it's cost the employee $50, but through Prudent RX it'll cost nothing, and we'll have that cost avoidance.
Just to give a perspective for some of these folks.
Any other questions?
I just want to say that Mr. Hidalgo and Mr. Roosevelt joined the meeting.
And Mr. Roosevelt, too.
I did say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I can see him, he's hiding there. You're behind.
I'm behind Bob.
Bob's paying attention. I'll go very well.
So some other decreases in appropriations, non-salary and benefit appropriations. We're limiting the budgetary reserve for this year. We usually put about $1 million or so in budgetary reserve. That's where we put expenses in the budget, and then as items go over budget, we move that over there. If in the situation that we're in, especially if we're going to talk about using any use of fund balance later, probably not a great idea to have a budgetary reserve at the same time. Before we work out fund balance, we should take that out. So we're removing $1.1 million budgetary reserve. We looked at substitute service, and we've decreased the budgeted amount by $124,000 for substitutes. Do you want to explain exactly what we're planning on looking at? Or?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the savings are resulting from some modeling that we did in reducing the total number of building subs that we have. The building sub line item is what is the biggest driver of the cost of the program. So building subs are also the key to the success of the program, because that's where your fills come from, the building-based subs. We have some daily subs, not a large number in that pool that pick up assignments daily. So our thinking is that if we pull back the number of building subs that we have, we will definitely be able to take this budget from where it's sitting now down by $500,000 without reducing the rate of pay. Because looking at the rate of pay is another option that we have if we want to take this budget item down to a lower number. But what ESS and I think would be the best plan of action would be to have a more conservative number of building subs. And then what we'd like to do for next school year is have our building sub program begin on October 1st and end at the end of May. So the months of September and the month of June will be fully filled by daily substitutes. So the thinking is that our building subs will fill those positions in a daily capacity, because when you run the program on the front end of the school year and on the back end of the school year, you have extras, because there's really no one absent at the start of the year. And towards the end of the school year, while you may see absences, it's more of a fun time for students. A lot of our very in-depth learning is probably commenced by the end of June or beginning of June. So that's where we can see some cost savings. So instead of having 180 days at a bill rate of $233, you'll have 155 school days at the bill rate of $233, and that will help to bring the cost down. So I've spent a lot of time looking at what will this do to fill rates. So right now, it's obviously costing us more money than we have to spend to have a 98% fill rate. The 98% fill rate has been really wonderful for so many reasons. If you think back to last year, for those of you that were here, I talked briefly about our support staff sub situation and how low our pay rates are. And at some point, we'll have to think about raising them. So we only have a 40% fill rate on the support staff sub side. So when you have such a robust program where you're running at 98%, we have help in the building. So our schools have had a really nice year in having people not only to fill our teacher vacancies, but to help in many other capacities. So, but it's expensive, and we see that we need to pull back from that. So by going to a lower number of building subs, we're going to run around 90% to 94% most months. In the months of November and December, around the holidays, we're going to drop to around 70. So in speaking to ESS regarding what do we do when we drop lower than is really sustainable, they have some ideas for us that they utilize in other districts. So in the months where we see the fill rate potentially drop from the low to mid 90s to the 70s to even the mid 60s, we can, they will send out a web alert to all of the daily subs and offer them the opportunity to be temporary for the month as a building sub. Now, we won't guarantee them work every day, but we will guarantee during these high need months that they can get paid the building sub rate of pay. So that's a strategy where we can try to make sure that we don't have some months that are really hard for our staff to manage because the fill rate is so low. So that's where we're at, and I think ideally the program would run best at about, we're looking at 47 building subs, only full-time, only 5 days a week. I think if we could sit at 50 or 52, we'd be a little better, but the 47 is what gets us to the 500,000 in savings.
I think this sounds like a good plan. Maybe this is not necessarily what I'm going to suggest, but for October, or rather September, could the building subs be given preference for the daily? Could ESS give them preference in terms of daily hires?
I mean, I could certainly ask that question.
Just would hate to lose those people in October and September.
And I just want to add that one of the big things that we talked about is that this area was severely under budgeted this year. It was only $1.5 million in the budget. And the program, if we had the 70 subs, it would cost like $3.1 million. So that's a huge gap. That, Mr. Sauer.
I just need a clarification, Christine, if you would. Your fill rate statistic, is that with the building sub built in?
The one, my projections?
No, so when you say you have a 98% fill rate, does that include the building sub?
That's the program.
So what is the fill rate without the building sub?
I did not calculate that.
Okay. My fear is there's a limited amount of certificates going out every year for teachers. I mean, I understand this and I appreciate this. I have a real problem with this. If we don't, and I'd like to know what that fill rate is minus building subs, because you're given two, depending on the building. If you don't have them and people don't come, they don't pick up jobs on the help wanted ads, our fill rates are going to go down dramatically.
If you look at it from, I mean, I can frame it a little bit differently. If you look at it from the lens of who's work, the large majority of the entire school year is staffed by building subs. We have approximately 6 daily subs that come through a day. So that gives you a sense. Now, some of that is because the work is going to the building subs. So it's hard to know without them, what would we look like? Because they have the work. And if they're taking up all the work, there's not much for the dailies.
Or not, we don't know.
We don't know. So like it would be hard to predict. You know, when we've talked about this before, and we've talked about this, you've been on the board a while, we've talked about subs a lot. The building sub program does bring you more success because of the guarantee of work. Like before we had the building sub program, we didn't run well at all. And you could have the same total number of active subs, but it's that commitment of daily work because the subs can work in multiple districts. ESS is across Bucks County, Montgomery County. So if I don't have a commitment for daily work, I can go to Neshaminy, I could go to New Hope, I could go all over and fill my work week. So the idea behind the building sub program is lock them in. But the problem is you lock them in and you may not always have work. So then, you know, that's where it becomes a bit of a balance. So I think if we peel the number back a bit, we won't have as high of a fill rate, but we'll still be successful. Like right now, if you look across the county, Neshaminy has a 91% fill rate, which is the second highest after hours. But the other districts are running.
But how many building subs do they run?
I don't know, I could ask. They're an ESS
Because if we're
program
including
too.
that in the entire fill rate, our numbers may not be apples and apples as well.
Yeah, but they're running like 60s, 80s, a couple are at 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple. First, for the public, Christine, you said fill rates in the 60s, so you're saying 40% of our staff doesn't come to work in a given month?
No, the fill rate is 40%.
No, the fill rate was 60%.
Right.
So that means 40% of the staff are not in the building.
No, that's not what it
The people who
means.
are absent, then we're only filling 60% of those seats.
Is that correct? Okay. That's fine. And to your comment, Yoda, about we grossly under budgeted, this board asked the administration, was that enough money? And we got lots of nods, that's fine. So I'm going to ask Dr. Sanko to hang this budget item on somebody. I'm real concerned to reduce it. Someone owns this. I don't want to hear it's not my responsibility if this gets overspent next year. Make sure that we've got enough money for that, because we were up by a factor of 3. And that can't happen, ever. I mean, someone's got to own it. I don't want to hear lack of accountability on these anymore. Someone's got to own whatever this budget item is. So, Dr. Sanko, you hang it around somebody's neck that is theirs moving forward. And make sure we have the right number in. So, I got the material on people not in and the number of subs needed per building and stuff, and it's astonishing. And in November and December, there are weeks we might as well not open schools. It's so astonishing how many people are out. So someone better get this one right moving forward. This can't keep happening. I don't want to hear we overspent again, because we know this was huge. It was enormous this year.
But I think from what I know, in defense of the administration, is that I think Christine gave the right number, or close to the right number, but that number never made it into the budget. So it's not that somebody, I mean, somebody that definitely.
Someone's responsible.
But that person is not here anymore, so. Yeah.
You know,
I think personally this line item is going to be somewhere in the $3 to $5 million range every year.
I mean, we
And
cannot make it $5 million.
That's on top of salaries, that's on top of benefits and everything else that we're already paying. So, you know, for me, you might as well just set it high and be surprised if we don't hit that number.
Yeah.
A couple of questions.
Yeah, Mr.
Just from my understanding, Christine, can you walk me through how the sub process works? Let's say I'm a teacher and for whatever reason, I can't make it into work. So I'm using my phone and an app, I'm assuming, right? And letting the system know that I can't be there. And now the system knows that it needs a sub. so that's where it connects to ESS, and ESS tries to fill it. Is that right? Or is there a step where either this administration or at the building level, they can see that and they can figure out, well, wait a minute, I can sort this out because there's something going on. Is that level there, or does this happen automatically where it's a little bit out of everyone's control?
So I think it depends on the circumstances. So on a typical absence, we ask, and we have instructions that ask teachers to put in the absence as soon as they become aware that they need it. So there are some absences in the frontline system for 3 weeks from now, because they know I have a cardiology appointment, my whatever the circumstances are. So they're in and the building subs are placed. That's your ideal absence situation, in advance. Professional development, in advance. A field trip, in advance. But someone gets sick at night, what we ask, and we do push this out frequently, and I know Nicole and Al talk about this with their principals that report into them. The sooner you put it in, the better it is for students, for planning, for placement. So if you don't feel well, err on the side of caution, you can cancel it. So that's the instruction that we give. So the teacher can put the absence through a frontline on an app or on their computer. There's a phone number, so it becomes entered. It then goes into the frontline system. The first people placed are the building subs. When all of the building subs are placed, it will then go out to the daily subs. Now, at the high schools, it's a little more complex. So where the building subs are placed might not be exactly where the school would like them to be. So they may maneuver them around. Sometimes, if it's too close to the start of the school day, the teacher will call the school, and the school will enter the absence. Sometimes the absence gets entered, it's an emergency situation. The absence might not get entered until much later in the school day. So it's a mixed bag. And then there's different types of things that need approvals. So everyone has their paid time off, their accruals that are theirs. When those accruals are exceeded, you need special permission. You need to apply for FMLA or another board author, a board policy afforded leave. If you are, I'm trying to think of other things that need special approval. So we have situations where it's not automatically put in for it, but you do need a special approval.
So in the cases where we can plan for this, does our system frontline or at the building level or at the administrative level of the whole district, do we have an opportunity to get in when you look at those plan ones to figure out how can we plan for this?
Well, we have a provider, we have a third-party contractor called ESS, so that individual, the district manager, every morning from about 4 a.m. to about 9 a.m. is actively working on this, talking to the schools.
So it's just ESS, but that's what I'm asking. I understand that there's a third-party ESS. I want to know if our district, the administration at the district level or at the building level, has access to this information, and if they can do any planning, or does this automatically go right into ESS and ESS wants to fill the hole?
Well, ESS does provide the substitutes, they do manage the program, but we're in frontline all the time. I'm in there daily,
So,
the
like
principals
Christine.
are in there daily.
So, for example, when Nicole was the principal of Goodnoe, she could manage all of Goodnoe, the absences of Goodnoe. When Al was the principal of Council Rock South, he could manage it. But above that, right now, Nicole and Al can see the absences for the district, like Christine can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, so I'm just trying to understand how, when you say manage, that's really what I'm interested in, is what ability does the building and does the district have to manage this to maybe not involve ESS?
Well,
Is there any ability, or if somebody's out, they're out, and there's nobody or nothing that can come into play?
So in order to manage a sub-program effectively, it used to be in-house, that you need a staff member to manage it because it is an enormous job for a district of this size. And then you would also then absorb the cost of the PSERS contribution, and then you would absorb unemployment, you'd absorb workers' comp. So it's sometimes more cost-effective to have this outsourced rather than in-house, which I think speaks to why so many districts have either ESS or Kelly or a different service provider.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to look at is what Dr. Thorwald was saying. We budgeted a certain amount, and it got used way more than we anticipated. So I'm trying to understand what controls we have, either at the district level or the building level, to manage that, to understand whether you really need that. If there's a building sub there, maybe it's already there, maybe the building sub can cover another absence. Maybe they can't, I don't know. This is why I'm interested to know if we can do that. Maybe there's a principal, maybe there's somebody else that has a certificate that can manage that. I don't know.
The building subs are covering, so I go back to the Nicole example. Nicole's the principal of Goodnow. She goes in the morning or before she leaves. She has no absences, but a building sub was assigned to her building. That building sub could end up at Council Rock South, at Council Rock North, at Holland Elementary, at Wrightstown Elementary, and that's some of the work that Steve does in ESS. If no one at Goodnow is absent, there's an extra person that would go and plug a hole somewhere else.
Okay. So do we have any, since at least you guys have a pretty good handle on both how ESS works and Frontline works and how we work with them, do we have any understandings and explanations for why we were off by a factor of 3, why this has got used so much? And that we don't know about it until budget the next year?
Is absenteeism higher now than prior to?
So we did a calculation on absenteeisms that we sent to the board, and our absentee rate this year is somewhat higher than it was last year. So we do know that that's a factor. We know that there was an increase in the rate of pay per day, and the highest rate of pay is that building sub rate. In Christine, I think it's $233 a day per building sub. So right now we're running, the district has 70, and again, Christine, I'll ask for your help. We have 70 building subs assigned across the district as of today that are guaranteed work at $233 a day, 5 days a week.
Can I say something? The way I understand it, Mike, is that it was budgeted the wrong way. It's not that we exceeded the budget wrongfully. When you under budget so severely.
You've compared this to previous years then, to understand that it was budgeted wrong?
I think we increased the rates, right? So it's not the same.
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, that's the analysis that I'd like to understand.
Yeah, I just, as a follow-up, I guess my question is, so I'm just going to throw up, and you have a $12 million budget that is budgeted throughout the year, and in December, you realize that you've spent $9 million of that $12 million, and you still have another 6 months to go. Like, who's responsible for like saying, hey, guess what? Like, I'm at 75% of my budget and it's December. Like, we found out about this last month. Like, how does it not get picked up in November? Like, not that we could even solve the problem, but to say, oh, geez, we have a problem here where we're going to be, come April, we're going to be $1.5 million short in this one line item. Like all the other things, like for example, transportation. It's whatever the number is, $12 million. Every month, we know what we're spending. So like at this point of the year, out of the $12 million, we've spent 75%, so we're at $9 million. In December, we knew we were at 75% of a budget that there was no way in God's green earth we were ever going to be in line. Like, who's responsible for at least saying, hello?
So I think we all know that we were without a business administrator for close to a year, and then we were without an assistant for a very long period of time as well. This particular line item is budgeted out of the business office. So in their absence, so it was not budgeted for properly, and we don't have to go over all of that history. at this point. So it wasn't budgeted for properly, and then the individuals that would normally send up the alert that the account was overspending were not in place. So Mr. Rapp and I have already talked about our plan for moving forward. We're thrilled that he's here and that Ms. Rabanowitz is back. I can't see this ever replicating itself again, but that is a reality of this situation that is being missed. I mean, obviously, if Dr. Sanko and I knew that this was overspent, we would have said something because we were talking to you about how happy we were with our fill rates. So I understand that you're looking for accountability and to spend some time on that, but that is the reality of it, and we certainly weren't obscuring that it was overspent. We have been really happy in seeing how well our schools have been running and how happy our staff have been and our principals have been and feeling supported. Without leadership in the business office, we were not aware. It won't replicate itself again.
So, last one, this is it. Do we have any other areas of our budget that might fall victim to the same thing that this line item was? Are there any other lines where we're not looking at a burn rate, where we're not looking at how much we budgeted and how much we're spending on a month-to-month basis for every area of flexible budget items?
I'm trying to look at that as much as I can. But part of what I would like to implement is, and I've talked about this a couple of times with different people, is we're sending information out to the areas that are responsible for the spending in those areas to say, here's where you're at, here's where you are compared to your budget, to say something, a monthly report, to say budget, they can look at that and say where they are, and it should be able to tell where they should be, and especially in areas where I would like to do that for a lot of areas, but especially in areas where things are where implement some kind of process where when we are in a situation like this, we're seeing it early on and say what can we do here, and then bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
What's the tape?
So we had extensive discussion about this in preparation for this meeting. And the way I understand it, I mean, it's sort of hard to imagine how this happened. But the way I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a budget projection for what our sub costs would be. That forecast figure didn't make it into the final budget. That's, it fell between the lip and the cup. And that's where the error occurred. And the person who was responsible for it is no longer here. We have a new business manager and a new assistant business manager. And just so, I think you all understand this, but just so anybody listening, the reason why our costs went up is because we were successful in raising the fill rate, which meant we were spending more money on subs. And of course, the reason it went up was because we raised the rate, which further increased the cost, but we had to do that to be competitive with every other district around who's trying to find subs. So a couple of things that we understood were going to happen, including a better fill rate, which we all want for our kids in our classrooms so they're not, as somebody puts it, in study hall instead of learning. And the other is we raised our rates, and the board was fully supportive of doing that because we wanted subs, qualified subs in classrooms. The big problem occurred because the forecast number didn't get put in the final budget. That's where the error occurred. And I know it won't happen again with
Yeah, and I
Tony
think
and-
Bob Reinhardt, at the last time he was here, he addressed that. He said that if the right business director was here, this would not have happened. It was not only that we did not have a business director, we did not have a proper assistant. So that was a double hit. So, and that's why it fell between the cracks. Nobody could see it because I think if Tony was here earlier, he would have seen it, he would have alerted us.
Yeah, well, so I can accept that on one side. I think there's two sides of it though, and my concern is that this isn't a canary that they're, that, you know, and I'm happy to hear that we've got a solution, because pointing out a problem and accepting it is the first step. And then instead, you know, and then we got to come up with a solution.
I
And the
think
solution
part,
works.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rosette, I didn't mean to cut you off. Part of that solution is, Tony and I have spoken about this, and about him, as soon as he gets his feet under him, he's walking into his first budget. He and I have spoken about weekly meetings to do a cost analysis from week 1 last year to week 1 this year, week 51 last year to week 51 of this year. Because, as you well know, a budget is a living document, right? And it can't be that we don't have check-ins on it. So I would like to think that under normal circumstances, we would have had at least quarterly check-ins to be able, and I have to tell you, I don't know that that existed before here, but Tony and I have spoken at length about that, and I don't think quarterly is enough. I think it's got to be done more regularly than that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, and that's a quick, easy way to understand how we have a $16 million deficit. If you've got practices where there wasn't something to review this, and we had individuals that shouldn't be here that aren't here anymore.
And you heard me talk about meeting with Bob Reinhardt on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And we did that every single day, and that was, they were really big ticket items that he would come and say, we didn't, this wasn't budgeted for. That wasn't budgeted for. Here's how I'm going to fix it. Then we would bring it to the board. You all approved some moving money around to take care of some of that stuff. And the work we're doing right now with the entire cabinet group, we're tightening up the line items, the things like you're seeing up here that we're talking about now, and we're also tightening up the process. And that process includes having eyes on the budget all the time because it is a living, breathing document.
Well, one minute, because maybe I'll hit what you're, because I've heard you say accountability a couple of times, and I didn't say, and I've said it. Just a premonition for everyone else, I'm going to talk about this in the next board meeting. I want a job description and what everyone does and what they're responsible for every person in this district, because we've seen recently that just because we think someone's supposed to do something, hands go up, we don't, no, it's not in their job. So I'm going to ask this board to make a formal vote to put a job description on every man, woman, and child in this district with accountability, because
I have no problem seconding that.
that's, I think that's where you're headed, so.
Yeah, because my point was basically that, like, it shouldn't fall.
Everyone falls on the end.
It shouldn't fall on Tony. Like, you are the person who, in my opinion, should have been alerted, as opposed to the one who should have, like, I understand that, but I mean, somebody has to be, like for example, I'll just use Nicole's, when you're the principal at Goodnoe, aren't you responsible for everything that goes on in that school, including the budget of the building?
Absolutely.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, so you're responsible, not, it falls, it all filters up to administration, to the finance, but I mean, you're responsible, like Mike was saying, it's gotta be on somebody to alert you, like I said, I don't,
I think I have responsibility though to make sure that I'm looking at that budget and actual every week at least, and seeing where we're at, and drawing attention to the right people when I see something that I think is going wrong. So, I guess I just would say that some people don't have not everyone has the financial, like I've done this for a long time, and I know things to look for more than maybe someone who's running a building may know, or where we're at. So I would say, you know, I don't want to. There's a certain amount of responsibility I feel I should take.
agree, but I don't think it should be 100, in this particular case, I'll just say, I don't think it should be 100% your responsibility. That's just my own opinion, so I'll just second what Mike said. Yeah, I'll go for what everybody's responsible for, including the budget of their own departments.
Well, I'm not evading responsibility. That line item doesn't sit in the HR budget. It sits in the business office budget. I don't have access to where it's at, how far along it is. That would have to be provided by a member of the business office that was not here last school year. So we can sit it, I'm not afraid to say, if I was accountable, I would tell you. I don't have access to it. If you would like me to manage the sub-budget, then it will need to be moved into the HR budget, and then I can manage it effectively. If not, I'm dependent on those in the business office to send me those updates. And we will ask from now on if it becomes my responsibility, and I have no problem with that, but then we need to determine that, because in the 11 years I've been here, it has been managed by the business office. So I'm not evading responsibility, and we can take out job descriptions, we have them. I'm not afraid to be accountable if I've made a mistake.
Okay. Fair.
Mr. Thorwood and then Mr. Hidalgo.
I don't have any questions.
All right, Mr. Hidalgo.
What I was thinking is, in Munis, isn't there something in our software that maybe you could have an alert? If you had, can you tie in a burn rate in the budget line? Do you think? You can,
I don't know that Munis has the capability to.
Be nice if-
I don't know enough about it, but I don't. Knowing what I know about financial software, I would think.
Sure, I mean,
probably
you're just, I'm the same, but I'm thinking.
I mean, I can,
there's
we
something
can,
there.
we can check with,
I would think that they could figure out how to put an alert on there if the burn rate gets out of whack. If not, that sounds like a good idea.
We spend a lot of money on software. If you don't like Munis, you're the new guy, throw it out. That's fine too. It's-
I will tell you, I don't know enough about
Okay,
Munis.
that's fine.
To weigh in an opinion on it.
That's fine.
I'm still learning, and I've had days scheduled to learn Munis, and I've had to cancel them because I've been kind of busy. So.
I think just to sort of tie in from what we heard from Christine as well as what we heard from Bob and what we heard from you, just to tie that back. In an ideal system, I would expect, I would think, I would hope that we'd have a belt and suspenders approach, not just one person or two people at the district level, but coordination with principals at a building level, so that when an item like this comes up, whether HR finds it and tells the business office, or business office finds it and tells HR, the next step is to communicate that back down to building levels and get some people involved to disseminate this and come up with a solution on to fix it. Because hypothetically, if we're 6 months from now, and whatever systems we've got, wherever this is going to live, we run into the same problem, great, you guys know about it, then what? How do we fix it in a month, right? I think that's going to involve more than one person. It's going to involve several people, and it's going to involve several layers of people. So that's, when we talk about, when I was talking about managing of the system, that's where I was hoping to go to. And I think that when we talk about accountability, yeah, there's that, but I would hope that there'd be a belt and suspenders approach so that it's not just one person that finds the fly in the ointment and also has to pick it out.
Can I say something? So, in my experience from the business world, the budget lies with the finance department. So, and there is a connection between input from the different departments to the finance department, but it is the finance department really that can tell if things are working and if there is a deficit or a surplus and so on. So these connections probably have to become more solid, but I don't really see that anybody else will be able to figure out if there is like a deficit or a surplus, except not one person, but the whole finance department. This is their job. And Mr. Salomon, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just real quick, a couple of things. This area is not being overspent. This area is just mismanaged due to the lack of proper budgeting being brought into the budget. My question is, the principals have a building budget, correct? In that building budget, I only know it from a PTO when when somebody needs something, we help out, right? Does the principal have a line item on what's allocated for subs? Al Shingen, is that enough?
No, the building budget is based on a per pupil allocation.
That's what I thought.
And, Count Roxelle is a large building, it's not a huge budget.
So an average principal in our district has no idea what they're spending in subs throughout the year.
It's budgeted out of the business office.
I heard you say
Yeah,
that, I
like,
did.
So like that's,
So
it's
there's
not
no,
budgeted anywhere
but
else.
it circles back to, I think, what everybody's trying to
Yeah.
get to. How can we put in some layers, at the building level, look, you have $100,000 in subs, and monitor every time you're clicking a sub, and at least that gets people talking. I don't know.
I'll tell you another problem with it, and how it was budgeted last year was, it was not budgeted by school. It was budgeted $758,000 in elementary and $758,000 in secondary. And that's how the budget.
The budget line was 1.588, June 2nd of last year. Go look at the meeting. That was what was presented to the board.
Yeah, but what I'm saying
Right.
is there, so the expenses for those items go into the right, go into the building, but if you compared that account across, you would see an expense and you'd see zero budget. You'd have to go up to a top line item to see the entire budget for that set of areas. So this year it's budgeted correctly. The budget is based on getting where I'm expecting us to be at the end of the year, and it's allocated according to what those buildings spend.
And I appreciate it. I think I'm kind of saying what Bob and I think everybody else is sort of saying. Like, no one knows except you or whomever that we're hitting numbers, because at the principal level, they're just glad to get the sub, putting them to work, and then the next day rolls in. And I'm not looking to create jobs, but there's got to be something that, all of a sudden I'm over my budget. Last year I spent X amount of hours in my building. That's probably what your projection is moving forward. How do, to me, it's that simplistic. And maybe the math isn't exactly right, but at least it starts the phone calls.
Right.
But at the building level, again, I go back to Nicole Goodnow, at the building level, teachers are entitled to whatever days they're entitled to, their sick days, their personal days. So Nicole's job at the building level is to make sure kids are taken care of and the classes are covered. So if somebody's out for 2 days for a professional development and reading workshop or 2 days for bereavement, Nicole will know that, but she's not managing the money on that. Her job at the building level, or 10 elementaries, 2 middles, 2 high schools, their job is to make sure kids are covered with capable substitutes. The money part of it goes to the business office where that money is budgeted. So at Holland Elementary, Joe McClay is not going to know that a 3rd grade teacher was absent 3 days, and that was $233 times 3 days. He's got to know that he's had coverage for that. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm just, my only question is, well, why don't we affix a dollar sign to that he knows that's what he's churning in terms of spend?
That's my concern, because he's gonna know about it, but how do you fix it? That's like if I got a drawer in my house of petty cash to use, and I got one kid that's grabbing more money than the others, I know about it, but how do I fix it?
Well, but how would you fix it since it is contractual? And, because I would tell you that if
Well,
I
you come
was
up with a
here,
budget number. So how did you come up with a budget number? I would just break it down based on the building size and at least start there as at least a conversation piece.
Well, right
I
now-
just want more people being accountable and talking about what could possibly be a problem.
see,
I'm not expecting a problem with you here, Tony, but
no, well, I guess what I'm saying though is if I was here at the time, and I wasn't, so, my first plan would probably be to come back to you to say, we're going over budget here, and we're gonna have to do something to reduce.
Something's going on.
Reduce, we're getting this 98% coverage. Are we gonna have to, do you want us to reduce, and again, we're not gonna budget the same way, so it shouldn't be an alert, but do you want us to reduce that coverage percentage so that we're saving money in that area?
we would likely tell you, maybe we don't need to do professional development during the school year when there's kids in school. I mean, we pay subs because we pay teachers to not be in classrooms. And that's not sick or contractual, we do that. And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should pack those at the beginning and the end of the school year. And that knocks a whole lot of subs out. So, I mean, those are things you hear from the board. You know, maybe you don't want to hear that, but those are things you could hear from the board. You know, maybe we don't send people to professional development when there's kids in the building. We do it before the kids come, after they leave, because our contracts run that way.
So follow up on that, is it something you think we should do this year for the remainder until like?
I don't know that we can anymore this year, because things have been scheduled and paid for.
I don't know. Is there? I don't know.
Here's the other side. What happens if we dip down to the 70 or the 60% fill rate? Does that mean that we're putting kids in gymnasium? What happens in that situation?
Yeah.
That's when the kids go to study hall, right?
Or we, have teachers cover on their prep time, which the cost associated with that now.
Yeah, I mean, picking up from Mrs. Pally said, there's a lot of us sitting around this table who have private business experience and how to do things. And I think this is not the first time that some of us are scratching our heads recognizing the difference between the two areas of work. And I recognize at some point it's numbers, but yeah, I mean, I recognize it's different. We need to figure out some way to make this work, because our budget needs to be sustainable. We need to have a sustainable path of recognizing how to educate kids in the best buildings that we can afford, with the best teachers that we can afford, and the best curriculum that we can afford. But it can't, I mean, we need to look at some of this. We got too many areas that aren't being watched, or that don't seem to be accountable, or can't be corrected in the short term, aside from asking the board for more money, which ultimately is asking the community for more money. And that's the way it's always been, and I recognize that's the way people want to continue. But I think that when we're looking at starting numbers of $16 million in deficit, we have to start figuring out how to get this sustainable. Because what we've seen this year is things only cost more money, but we're not getting more money in revenue. So sooner or later, we have a problem.
Can we continue to the next slide? Go ahead.
The next item is technology. Not looking at some of these projects and decided $520,000 projects that need to be put off for next year. There are still some bigger projects that still on there, but there was that amount of projects. Curriculum, Alan will pull that, and we're about $500,000 or $501,000 of wants in the curriculum budget.
Can you kind of elaborate on that and on where that's coming from?
So technology is not
We're in the short term effect, it's about kids, so.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I think his question was about the.
Yeah, about the curriculum, so where's that 500 kind of cut back coming from?
Yeah, where everything is coming from, right? All the cuts.
Right, is it new programs, is it books, is it, we just want to make sure we're not shortchanging the students?
No, so I say, when we started to examine the $16 million shortfall, and obviously we want to go back and sharpen our pencils and do our due diligence, but we're also mindful, I think we said at the outset, that we want to protect the classroom. So how do you, and ultimately I think all these conversations tonight are about striking that balance between, we want to offer the best possible program and curriculum for our students, they deserve that, but we want to do it in a cost-effective manner. So we were able to go back and speak to each of the 16 account professional development curriculum coordinators. So that varies from your larger budgets for the core four, math, social science, English, down to maybe some smaller budgets with family consumer science and all. And everybody was able to kind of just, again, sharpen the pencil a bit. I'll give you an example of some of the cost savings, I think in world language, we had projected 600 new Spanish 3 textbooks. When we went back and looked at program planning and saw the actual enrollment figures, it was looking like 500. So, when you start adding up 100 textbooks, $34,000 here, and then there's opportunities for cost savings, maybe with an AP Chem, where they said, okay, we can utilize the class 7, it won't impact overall instruction. You can capitalize on some online resources. We had some diagnostic testing. For example, Cadence, we switched out with, I don't want to start naming too many vendors, but there was opportunities within those 16 areas where some it might have only been 7,000, 8,000, but then others you might have 40 or 60, and then ultimately the cumulative effect was the $500,000, which was nice. Now I will say the one area where we ended up getting, and Andrea is here to speak to it, the STEAM, and it's not a STEAM initiative anymore. We're full steam ahead. She was a ton. And we're proud of the work that's being done, and it's well received. In fairness, we were a bit ambitious when we started to kind of project the numbers going forward financially, and we were kind of looking at it as, instead of looking at it as phased in over like a 6-year curriculum renewal cycle, we had a lot of kits and robotics and things that were included that Andrea, in speaking with the teacher, said, well, yeah, that might be a one, but we don't even know if we could fit that in at this point. That's really a year 2 or 3 project. That's a 4 or 5. So then that number came down.
And another piece to this is the language arts programs that we're hoping to adopt, which we've talked about a lot, the cost for that. But the coordinators certainly have that big picture sense of things as well. So they know that, it's cyclical. So right now, that's a priority for us. If that passes, that we're budgeting for those 2 programs, Reading Horizons and Wonders. This is not necessarily the year for other areas to have big ticket items. So they certainly were a part of those discussions and are aware of that. So we're projecting out beyond, the coming year, but they've been a part of those discussions, the coordinators.
And some of those things that Al and Nicole talked about, we had things as small as $65 and as large as, the 100 textbooks to $35,000. Our coordinators sat with Al and Nicole multiple times, and, on a $270, $270 million budget, $65, $25,000 doesn't seem like a lot. When you start putting 14, 15, 16 things together, it adds up and helps a little bit anyway.
From a technology standpoint, those are just 2 projects. One was to replace some of the phones in the district. We can do that. We were able to get money this year out of this year's budget to replace some of the more critical ones. The other ones we'll replace in the future if we can. And the other one was to replace some of the speakers in the classrooms. We're using some creative technology to get around needing those. That's something we can put off another year if we need to.
I got a question. Regarding technology, prior to COVID, we didn't have as many Chromebooks.
Correct.
And now, I think one of our last meetings, you mentioned we have 20,000.
21,000 devices we support. That's Chromebooks, iPads, desktops, laptops, the display systems, the sound fields, everything we touch. There's about 21,000 devices.
And those are in elementary schools all the way up to high schools. And what class?
22 buildings, 18 locations.
And I could find them in a kindergarten classroom, and I could find them in a senior high school 12th grade program. And how much are we paying in repairs? Remember last year we were talking about the difference in repairs from one year to the next.
So this year last year we sat down and spent a lot of time analyzing it. We budgeted about $140,000 for repairs this year. We will hit $140,000. What's interesting is historically, the majority of the repair costs have been at the elementary level. This year, they've been at the high school level. And we haven't been able to identify a factor that's causing it, other than Nicole's now in charge of the elementary schools, and we think that's what it is.
So how much do we put into buying new devices? I understand it goes by by
So-
age group and building to some degree, right?
I have a 5-year projection. So Chromebook is good for 6 years. If you buy a Chromebook and use it at home, you can get 8, 10, 12 years out of it. But the Google Management Console, 6 years, and I have to replace it because I can't manage it anymore after 6 years. So that's the cycle that we use. The way that we've been doing it is at the end of the budget cycle, when I find out how much money I have, then I go back and look at how much what I can actually replace. For example, last year, we didn't have the money to replace all the machines we wanted to. So we bought a solid state drive, and we're able to extend some of the desktops and laptops for an additional 2 years. We've done that the last couple of years. So it's a balancing act, is really what it boils down to at the end of the day. We'll never be able to, I don't think we'll ever be able to replace everything when it needs to be replaced on a regular basis. It's just too expensive. And Chromebooks this year, before COVID, they were $215. I was getting them for $195.
Right.
Now they're $415.
So the technology is costing more.
A lot more.
A lot more. The repair is costing more. We have to replace them faster than you would at home. So obviously, it's an expensive line item. From an educational standpoint, kids prior to COVID, especially elementary level, weren't really using computers. I recognize technology is now part of our society, but thinking about screen time of a child goes to school and has the screen in front of their face, goes home on the bus, maybe they get car sick, maybe they don't. If they don't, they're probably watching their screen on the way home, right? And then they get home and they're watching the TV or the computer or another screen. It's a lot of screen time. It would be interesting to look at some of the rates of anxiety as well as learning, if that's really a valuable thing to have that much for that long. I'm wondering, are we able to save some money with looking at allocations of these things at a younger level?
One of the things that Dr. Sanko asked me to look into Monday is we're going to start looking at K through 3 in terms of the Chromebooks. Right now we're 1-to-1. We're looking at going back to classroom sets. So the kids wouldn't be taking them home. They wouldn't be taking them on the bus. They'd be available in the classrooms when they need them. Some of the elementary schools, and I just started looking into this, have even suggested that some of the grade levels they could get away with one set for every 2 classrooms, shared set, but we haven't gotten there yet. I just started looking into this. That will impact us, but it's K3, so it's not, when you look at 10,000 kids, it's not huge, but it's a little bit. So we're going to start looking at that as well.
And that's how it worked prior to COVID too,
Yes.
and it worked well in terms of the sharing of it. I think primary teachers, I don't want to speak for them, for all of them, but I think they would agree that in the last 2 years, they've been trying to fade back on that usage in school as well, and getting back to best practices that does not necessarily involve a device. So that's already happening in the buildings, so.
With that many devices, something else that rarely gets considered in schools, I know it probably keeps Matt up at night, is our security profile is ridiculous now compared to what it was, because every one of those is a security breach waiting to happen. And if we don't spend money on it, there we are. And we have nobody but ourselves to blame.
So that would be an interesting understanding of if there's budgetary savings from both the security side as well as the device
Well,
sharing.
you get no savings from the security side.
Well, you wouldn't have as many devices.
So that's fair.
So it's minimal. We've spoken about that, and you look at that. One of the considerations is right now with standardized testing, we started PSSAs this week. They're done electronically. They begin in grade 3. So, that's a consideration. While I've asked Matt to look at grades K to 3, we may have to go back and look at grades K to 2. Or how do we share Chromebooks if that's the direction we want to go. So we're trying to have a bunch of people look at this from a lot of different angles to see if we can reduce that number. It would reduce the repair cost, it would reduce the purchase cost, and it would allow us to have some machines that we, when we turn them over after 6 years, we don't have as many to turn over, so.
Mr. Hick?
You were saying that there's a reason why kids can't use their own laptops at home or whatever, because they don't want.
So we use a program called Go Garden, which we use to allow the teachers to do classroom management. They can see where the students are, they can actually control the Chromebooks. In terms of, they can lock them down, so students can only go to the websites that they're allowed to go to. They can't be drifting off and playing Minecraft somewhere. And the problem is a lot of parents didn't want us to install that extension inside the Chrome browser on personal devices. The other issue is when we pandemic first hit and we were using this, and they were using their personal devices, some of the parents, it was a shared device. So after the student was done, the parent would get on, not realizing the student was still logged into the browser, and then we could see where the parent was going, the email, all this. It created some issues for our privacy issues. So we don't install that on persons. When a student logs into Chrome with their user account, we automatically download certain extensions and install them in the Chrome browser. So it's creating some issues, so that's why we personal devices for that. Now, if they're no longer using the devices for that approach, then they can still use the personal device for doing research and whatnot. But.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I didn't know what the cost per student is for, having the Chromebooks, the repairs and everything else. Like, I didn't know if there was maybe an incentive, to have students download that Guardian. Hey, if you would download Guardian, you'll get X, but it's still saving the district money because now you don't have to worry about repairing their computers, providing the computers and whatnot.
Well, the other issue is that when they were using their own computer and then it didn't work, it was our fault because they had to download the browser. So it actually increased our cost. Just talking to them. So I appreciate the sentiment.
That's why you can't call Microsoft. One more, and then we can move on. Under curriculum, I'll throw a suggestion out. I've thrown it out before. I strongly urge you to look at it. It solves multiple problems. The state of PA requires 1 year of phys ed. We require 3. You could reduce phys ed costs, I won't say 2/3 because you make them elective for some people, significant cost savings, and provide all those extra places for people to take electives that they now pay community colleges and stuff to take phys ed over the summer so they can do it in-house. I think your savings would be significant, and they'd be headcount savings, so they'd be long-term.
Could someone explain that phys ed? Because
We require in the state of, or in Council Rock, we require our high school students to take 3 years of phys ed. Okay? The state does not require 3 years of phys ed. And in a limited, you only get so many classes a year in high school, and it's really, you really don't get any choice because of the tracks you end up on. So we see a lot of kids taking phys ed over the summer at Bucks Community College and some of these online places to free up a spot in their schedule during the year to take AP Stats, another art class, another music class, something that interests them. So, it's a requirement that I think is past its prime. And
I have to say I disagree with that because the rates of overweight and obesity that are leading causes of disease in the United States are up to 70% of the United States. So I think.
But I would argue that our phys ed class isn't going to fix that. No.
Just want to say something because I went to high school in Greece, and we did not really have all the sports and all the phys ed classes. But that was one of the things I totally admired when I came here. All the required sports, the physical education, so you can go out and move your body, because it's just miserable to just have to study the whole time. Because that's what we did, because it was not required.
You'll find a lot of kids never took a phys ed, never stepped into a phys ed class.
So what do they do for the requirement?
They take them over the summer. They take yoga classes over the summer at Bucks Community College.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
All right, the next item is buildings and grounds. We looked at, most of this is things like supplies, some equipment, dues and fees, repairs and maintenance, and we compared those numbers to last year and found that, or to where we're looking for this year to end, I should say, and found that there was about $470,000 in savings in these areas to keep them, keep those areas where at the same level they're at this year. So that's that $470,000. Use of educational initiatives is not, that's actually not a reduction in the budget. That is a fund balance that's been set aside for education initiatives. And what we're going to use that for in this budget is the smart board replacements throughout the school. So that's a, we try to keep that to one-time purchases that improve, you know, the quality of the education that we're providing to students, and better smart boards is going to do that. So that's actually just saying we're going to be, we're not going to budget for that as an expenditure, but as a use of fund balance.
Tony, can we talk a little bit about that? Because if you remember, we put $8 million aside for educational initiatives. At that time, I thought maybe we can hire some teachers with this money for STEAM or whatever, but apparently we can't because it's not a one-time expense.
Well, what I can say about that is, and talking, I did discuss this with Bob, and you know what the intent of it was. So what you could use it for salary-wise is if you decided you wanted to pilot a program and try something new and see how that worked over 3 years, with the intention of when that period, you could use that for that, but with the intention of once that period is up, you would then take it out and put it in the regular budget. But
so, like,
so
we had somebody from STEAM that we're not going to hire earlier because it would be nice to have, but we don't. So can we do that? Can we consider STEAM like a part of STEAM, a pilot program, so we can use money from the educational initiatives and not from the general budget?
If the intention is to eventually move that in, you know, see how it. I guess if you're doing it to see how it benefits the students, and then you know at the end of the period you say it's not benefiting the students, we're going to stop that, or it's benefiting the students. Now we need to figure out how we're going to pay for that out of the regular budget. And again, anytime that you do that, you have to be very careful, because if you find that you've added a program that's now a worthwhile program that you want to keep, you have to then find the money to pay for that long term, because we don't want to use educational initiatives for too many things that, you know, and I'm not saying that you're wrong, that wouldn't be a good use of it. I'm just saying that's the considerations that you have to make when making that decision.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out creative ways to use some of the money that is $8 million.
Well, I think as they develop the curriculum, they'll start spending it on science kits and STEAM kits and, you know, the jumpstart their curriculum, you know.
But it's not easy. Are we planning to do that soon, like next year? Or it's going to be sitting there?
I don't know, but we
So if I could jump in here, Tony. So we talked about a lot of ideas for this, everything from a data analyst to an assistant athletic director at the high schools, to materials for STEAM. And the many times we've met on this and talked about it, we got hung up on, we know that this ultimately, if it's of benefit, we're going to have to budget for it out of the regular budget. And we've been advised and been very careful with regard to people and personnel because of the associated revolving expenditure with the PCERS, with the healthcare, so So in Matt's case, that $336,000, in Matt's case, we know that we have a need for this one-time purchase of the, what do they call, touchscreen?
So it's the interactive displays, and it's just at the elementary level. We have a phased program to replace all the projectors and the old smart boards. The elementary schools were to be done this summer, and then the middle schools would finish it up next year. So I had in my budget 336 based on what we know we need in the elementary schools this year, and the decision was made that one of the ways that we could help with this budget imbalance was to take some of the fund initiative and then evaluate next year whether we do the same thing for the middle schools or just use the operational budget based on how things go.
Also, for the STEAM teacher that Christine was speaking about earlier, just to clarify, that was for a 0.2, to increase someone from a 0.8 to a 1.0.
And really what that means is from a 4-day-a-week to a 5-day-a-week teacher.
Which across the 10 elementary schools would really help to support students, but I just wanted to make sure that, just a reminder that she had said 0.2.
I think we had even talked about some capital expenditures and costs if we went with rock block or, had to work on changing the high school schedule. So that's another place. I just keep waving that flag.
Surrender flag?
Yeah. No, I'm not surrendering.
I said the surrender flag.
Reduction in per pupil allocation. So we talked about the building budget. So we set aside a certain amount of money and then we allocated to the school based on the number of pupils in the schools. What I did was I analyzed that spending over a 5-year period, which goes back to 17, because I did not include 20 and 21 because they're outliers. And I found that about 15% of the expenses that are budgeted in that area are not being spent. So in light of the situation, we're looking at reducing that budget by 15%. And we contacted and we're letting the building principals and coordinators decide where those reductions are going to come from in their own budget in those building areas. And again, we're not, this is money that generally isn't spent. We're not talking about a whole lot of money, only $255,000, and that's like a $1.8 million budget, which is really all that is. So it's a small savings, but I think it's a necessary savings since we don't usually spend it. And then special education, that number is a little bit low for what it should be, but Anthony, I forgot your name. I looked at his budget. Yeah, no, that's the point.
Much like Al and Nicole, what I did, I went a line item through the budget with the supervisors to see what was absolutely necessary to ensure that the students are getting the same thing they got this year, and know, to see what can we do, what can we make do with. I did a lot of different things. One of the things you guys were mentioning, one thing was like the electronic touch map. We have a paper version, and we said, let's do the paper version for another year before we make electronic. We had some we were piggybacking on some of the initiatives you had in general education for inclusivity. We were doing our thing to mirror that. So because you're not doing it, then we back off on certain supplies. I was conservative because I did not want to interfere with the great program that we have right now. So give me another year, and I can make sure that I can. I'm comfortable. I think it's maybe about 170.
170.
Yeah. But I do have an eye on it, and I can do, I can ensure, and I will give you my word, I'll do right by the children in the community, the special education community. That also includes special services. So we did change a vendor. We used to go to Bucks County Council for our SAP referrals for children at risk. They were unable to staff it for about, 5/6 of the year, so we were able to meet that need internally. So we're just going to go out with a different vendor to do outside assessments at a very great reduction in services. So changing in vendors, changing from electronic to paper, and piggybacking on the great work that's being done by Al.
Questions?
No, he said reduction in services, we were just laughing, you meant reduction in costs.
Oh, reduction in cost, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, it's fine, we got it.
Yeah.
No, we got it.
I think this is important to mention too. We have also been looking, no matter how big or how small an agreement we have with any of our third-party providers or vendors, we're going through one by one and talking with them to see if we can get any kind of relief, let them know the position we're in, if we can get any kind of relief. Once again, some we've heard no, and if we get a change from a 4% to a 3% or a 3 to 2, whatever we can realize in that, we're putting the effort in to do that with each and every partner we have in Council Rock. Much like Anthony explained with having to go to another vendor for some services.
The last item is just some, reviewing, we've been reviewing the budget line by line, and we found some, the budgeting of payroll is done in the business office with human resources. We found that some people budgeted the 300 to 900, which is done at the school level. They put in some salaries, so we moved things like that. It wasn't much, but it just, stuff that really doesn't belong there because it's budgeted elsewhere. So increases in revenues and decreases in appropriations. So estimated revenue, we increased our expected basic education subsidy. So every year, most school districts do this. We budget for basic education upon what the state expects us to receive for the year that we're in when we're doing the budget. So right now, I originally budgeted at 60. We gotten five of the 6 payments for the year. I added a 6th payment, but really that 6th payment is more than the other payments. So, and then you can see on the state website, it'll say how much we're expected to get for 22, 23. That number, the number will not reflect that amount. We looked at the access funding. We didn't have those numbers when we originally looked at the budget as far as what we wanted to do this year, but that's money that we have, that we determine how much of that we spend. We try to keep the spending at a level where we're bringing in money into the access program and kind of keeping the same, so we're keeping a balance in there. So we got that back to this year's budget, which added about $550,000. I think the total was like $1.5 million. $1,050,000. And then investment earnings, we worked with, we talked to Kevin Carpook at Cornerstone. We looking at how well we've been doing with investments this year. We raised the expected investment revenue from $2,500,000 to $3 million.
Short-term T-bills are pulling over 5% interest right now, so.
Well, no, we've got those bonds that are showing a loss right now, but really they're going to mature. Yep. So when we get them, it's actually a gain. We're going to have those coming in, and then we're going to be able to budget to buy more of those bonds that are, the bond market's upside down right now, as you know. So.
Do you have an estimated rate of return total from your conversation with him? That's fine.
Yeah, I can look it up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any questions on revenue?
You went from 2 million to 2.5 million.
We went from 2.5 to 3.
2.5.
We have pretty significant investments, so I think where the market's at is a good estimate. So we did find, as I said, we were going through the budget line by line, trying to make sure that everything's right. Changes, so we did find some things that we had to add back in. Student transportation, we were budgeted at about 14 million, which is where we're expected to end up this year, for the contracted services. That didn't take into account the 4.5%, so that's added in the 4.5% increase. So we added in 780,000 to cover that. To cover that 4.5% increase that right now is in the contract. we also found that commissions paid for tax collections wasn't budgeted, and that's not what we pay our tax collectors, but that's for the commissions that we pay for the collection of the EIT to Keystone, what we pay G.H. Harris to collect our delinquent occupation taxes, what we pay Fort Knox to collect our delinquent real estate taxes, what we pay the county for the collection of the real estate transfer taxes. So that's what that amount is. The intermediate unit operating budget, we found that there was like 2 items that are normally budgeted that we pay the intermediate unit that weren't budgeted, so we added those in. And then we found that high school athletics at South, that there were $275,000 of missing items that weren't budgeted in South. So we added that.
Basically, $1.5 million that wasn't budgeted.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Something about insurance increases.
Insurances. That was budgeted, that's in the original budget. So where we're at with insurance right now is we went out to market for our insurance plans. We're waiting for that to come back. So for that information to come back. We're supposed to get our results next week. So right now we budgeted, just based on a recommendation from our consultant, we budgeted, and this is not health insurance, but I'm talking, the auto insurance and liability insurance. We budgeted about a 15% increase over last year. Over last year's rates, we'll have better information next week, and I'm really hoping that there'll be some cost savings, some budget reductions in that, based upon what premiums we budgeted for compared to last, with that increase. Hopefully, the going out to market, we're doing better than 15% policy.
Great. Thank you.
Say we're going to get the estimates by May 30th. You're going to
May
get
3rd.
or 3rd.
May 3rd. We're going to get it.
All right, good. Thank you.
So, we're talking about where we go from here. This is just put this up here for information for your edification. A 1% increase with net would be about $1.7 million. That's about $54.29 per 40,400 of assessed value. 40,400 is about the median assessment on property in the district. So we're trying to give an idea of what an average household would be increased by with these tax increases. A 2% and net legal budget imbalance of $4.6 million. A 2% increase would be $108 for a $40,400 assessed value. 3% increase and that would leave a budget imbalance of $2,903,000. 3% increase would be $5.1 million, $162.97 per 40,000. Leave a budget imbalance of $1.1 million, and a 3.70 increase would cover the budget imbalance as it's shown in this presentation, which is about $201 per 40,400.
Is it possible, I recognize this may be a heavy lift, but is it possible to look at all of our courses that we offer in one column, and then in the next column, look at how many of those relate to state standards and cores of our education that we need to do, and then in the last column, align it with what amount is being enrolled by student, in other words, how popular they are. And maybe the fourth column, which is what it's costing us. Is that something that could be looked at?
Can you say the third column again?
Yeah, the third column is popularity, number of students enrolled.
And so I've got look at courses, state standards, popularity, and
is this the last slide?
No. Just. Okay, so where do we go from here? This is just a list of dates and what's coming up. So we talk about another finance meeting on May 4th. We have the regular facilities finance meeting on May 11th, which I'm sure we'll still be talking about this. We need to approve the preliminary final budget at the school board meeting on May 18th. And then we'll have another finance facilities meeting on June 15th. And the school board, hopefully we can approve the budget, final budget on the school board meeting on June 22nd. But if for whatever reason, we have a special meeting, we have to pass it by June 30th. And then just to talk about what's next, the special finance meeting, whatever information and feedback you want from us today, we'd like to provide that back to you. And, more adjustments to the budget based on direction from you, and also what, other changes that we can look at in administration. That's.
Can you put the tax increases back up?
Well, I'm thankful and grateful that you got 16 down to 6. And I realize that took a lot of work. I'm encouraged to hear that you found some areas where we weren't using it, like the 15% per student or per pupil reduction. That was areas that wasn't being spent. So I know a lot of work's been done to get to this point, and this is, I think, where closing that last $6 million is where it's going to get significantly more difficult. But I appreciate everything that you guys have done at this point.
So going back to, when we had, that's all I was thinking, when we started with 16 million, like I threw everything in the kitchen sink at this budget, which is a great way to start, because you say this is what everybody's asking for, this is what we feel would be beneficial, and obviously that's a good starting point. I'm happy again, as Mike said, that we're down $10 million from that number. I know some of this was not just getting rid of the asks, but sharpening the pencil with the other budgets, including projections. The one that someone had mentioned to me, so I figured I'd ask today about the math specialists. And that would have been, the ask was to have a math specialist, full 1 FTE at each school. Right now we're at 0.8 for the 10. So 2 full FTE would get us to what we're looking for, to have a full, not have math specialists jumping buildings. Is that
We requested 1.
1, so we still wouldn't be completely where we wanted. So 1 FTE. How would that look if we were at 9 FTEs? If I'm correct, saying it that way. Would there be 1 or 2 buildings that jump? And if I'm wrong, I thought there might be 8 FTEs and 10 buildings currently.
So while Nicole is looking at those numbers, it's not uncommon for us to share teachers across schools. So that happens at the elementary level with regard to specialists. So an art teacher may share 2 schools, a phys ed teacher, and the like. That's true at the secondary schools as well. So like we have a music teacher at the high school that would share with an elementary or a middle school. So it's not uncommon. Where it's uncommon, we would never share an elementary homeroom teacher with another building, right? And so right now, all of those special areas, math specialists, literacy specialists, psychologist, music teacher, art teacher, phys ed teacher, based on what their caseload is contractually, we have for many years looked at efficiencies in terms of maximizing the caseload and cutting down on the expense. So that would be exactly what we're talking about here with math specialists. I mean, ideally, we would like a math specialist at every school. We'd like a literacy specialist at every school. We would like more security guards. That list goes on. But it's a matter of, to going back to what everybody talked about, providing the best buildings, best programs, the best teachers for our kids. And as Al said, our students deserve that. And, that's kind of where we are. And you're right, when we looked at that 16 million, if you remember, when we started, I shared with the board that we looked at that, and typically we would have had things peeled off. Had Tony been here, we wouldn't have sat in front of you with $16 million, but getting Tony here, we wanted to get this conversation going, and we want you to know everything we know and everything we've done, line item by line item, and we'll keep going.
Okay, so just to follow up on the math specialist at the different schools, maybe, and if it's not done this way, if there's basically, maybe some schools have a full-time math specialist and other schools have less. Maybe look at where the need is the most, and if you can base that off of assessments.
Part of it's contractual.
Contractual, on which school gets what, or is it the teacher themselves? Or the specialists themselves?
Number of classes that you can teach. Right, so an art teacher, a music teacher, a phys ed teacher, a librarian, a STEAM teacher, they're allotted 6 classes per day times 5 days is 30 classes. Right, Christine? We're on board. So we, at a large school, if you look at a school like Sulphine-Stone or Maureen Welch or Newtown, you may need 1.5 art teachers because the number of kids exceed the number of classes that one art teacher could teach.
But how does the math specialist work? Because that's a building, not just a one class. A math specialist, I would think, is floating around and helping in the schools.
I just wanted to go back and clarify,
Sure,
Mr. Hildago.
please.
So we have 8.6.
Okay.
I knew there was a fractional amount there. So 8.6, one more will allow us to have one in each building. It won't be, there'll still be a little bit of sharing, but that's what we're used to already with smaller buildings and such, so.
And math is pretty much half of the core curriculum.
Half of the what?
Half of the core, like learning, is mathematics is the building block, besides literacy. So it's pretty important. But I'm going to jump off of that for a second and just give you an idea about my broad perspective on the budget. So the last couple of years, we've had some surplus, right? And I think the conversation before was, we don't like to, or someone had said, that we don't like to eat into our cash reserves or our capital reserves. But, if you had 2 really outrageous years where you're pulling in 10 million plus, it's okay to dip a little bit into something like that to just curb, because it's kind of an aberration on the opposite side this year. And I would like to know where we land in June. That's going to make a big difference in my decision if we can project where we are year to date. That would be helpful. So I think, bridging the gap this year is going to be I like the approach of multiple angles. So you might think of and look at it from a sense that last year's surplus, and say whatever that number is that people are comfortable with. There's always going to be the idea of a tax increase when we are contractually increasing our taxes. And if you say 2% is a good deal, like I think Mr. Tagley said, that we've got great deals at 2%.
I didn't say great, I said fair.
Fair. So the thing is, and I appreciate that. So the thing is you've advocated that 2% on our, relative to some other school districts where you're seeing higher increases. 2%. Well, we're going to have to not always rely on inflation and job increases and the funding from the state. That we have to keep up with our contracts, and it should be a contract not just with our teachers' units or the professional bargaining units, but also contract with the stakeholders, with the taxpayers. So we have to, make sure that people understand that we're not just raising taxes to raise taxes, but we have these bargaining agreements that we agree to and we pay for, so it's just a part of the process. Our job, as people who are fiscally responsible, is to minimize those tax increases. And I personally have when I first got on the board and knocked on doors after being appointed and then went to knock on doors to be elected, I have a soft spot for, and always have, if anybody knows me, for our senior citizens on fixed income. And what I see is from all around, just being bombarded from really high inflation, which we don't have to speak about. We all know where it's coming from, where every place you look. I would be in favor, and I've thought about this before, and I'm going to say it now so that maybe the solicitor can give us some guardrails on what we're allowed and what not allowed to do, is some kind of rebate if we are going to continue to go forward with increasing taxes in the time of high inflation, that we can try to protect our senior citizens with some type of calculation based on income, maybe number of years that you've been here, and then so basically shelter them from being hurt anymore. They've paid their dues over their lives and really have no control of what's going on from a macro scale. Neither do we, but we have a small chance to help out a little bit. Every little bit helps. And I'll just end with, I think Pennsbury made the paper, and I don't watch TV or read the paper much, but I think that I read a note that they are maxing out their Act 1 index, if that's going through or not. So we've got it pretty good here, where we haven't been coming close to the Act 1 index maximums. And I think we can still split the hair this year. And I think part of what might help is take some of the, how much was it, $17 million total over 2 years?
So could you address when we issue the bonds, how important it is to have this money on the side, otherwise we lose our ratings? Because you said you faced that this year. Could you share that story?
Yeah, so one of the things when we were preparing for the bond issue is we have to do a rating call with S&P, and they determine whether we're going to keep our AA rating. And it was a pretty smooth process. We were considered to be in good shape. The one question that they had is that we usually maintain a fund balance in the general fund of somewhere around 21 to 22 million. And at the end of 22, which is what they were looking at, we were at about 19. So they had questions about that, and we were able to explain to them that we have money in, we have a healthy healthcare fund balance, we have a healthy capital reserve fund, we have a healthy debt service fund that we can use all that money to all those funds to supplement what we have. So although we were down compared to where we would like to be, that was mostly due to the capital reserve transfer, and that it's not a problem. I would worry, have some concern, especially if we're talking about doing another bond issue next year, that we would lose some rating. And there is a cost to that. We're going to pay a higher interest rate no matter what. And as I sent out the board, we did very well with this last, especially considering the market. We did very well with this last bond issue. And in order to continue to do that, we need to make sure that we keep our rating where it's at.
I do have a question, because you brought that up. When did you learn when did you have a call with the S&P where they stated that they were concerned that we took a $20 million transfer? Because we were at $39 million.
Yeah.
And we went to 19. Yeah. And Bob Reinhardt stood here, and we can go back and listen to the conversation. But we asked that question that night about, is this going to affect our bond rating? And it was said, no, this would not be a jeopardy. And
well,
even, hold on.
Sorry.
Saying, and then also, if we even went to if we went to 60 million, we were never going to get up to the top, to the next rating up, but that, how would the S&P rating not know that we took a $20 million transfer to capital, and if they're saying that's concerning them, then is that money untouchable that we put there?
I wouldn't say that, there's things that we
It's
can.
news to me. I'm
Yes.
just wondering, when was this conversation with S&P?
April, right? Last
Late
year.
March.
Was the board notified that there was a question of the $19 million?
No, I mean,
We discussed it like at the last prep meeting. We didn't know.
So it just came to me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's pretty important, I think, that the board should know that there's a call in April from the S&P 500 that says that that $20 million transfer raised their eyebrows. I would like to know that sooner than later.
I think.
And now you're saying that we can't, I don't know.
Let
if
him
you-
answer. Let him answer.
Thank you.
I don't think we explained where we were and that we're still in a good position and we kept the rating. I don't think it was concern, it was more, and maybe concern is not the best word I should say. It's why are you different? And what our expectations are and where we're going. I mean, it was different than where it was the last time they looked at us, and they wanted to know why. I don't know. I guess the caution though is, I don't know where we want to go with that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use fund balance.
That's a good question.
Sure.
The $20 million that we transferred, is that now earmarked differently and we can't transfer it back?
We can transfer it back, but there are other things that we can do.
Okay.
If we needed to use the money, there are other things we could do. We could use that. So right now, when we pay our debt service, we transfer money from our general fund to the debt service fund to cover that, cover the debt service payments. We could use that money to make our bond payments, and we could utilize it that way.
Right, I think there was a way to do it. So all I'm saying is, however we have to do it accountingly, that's up in the stuff. We should consider looking at some of that surplus they've had this 1 year, whatever it is. It could be minuscule, but to not do any of that and put it all on the taxpayers while it's sitting there in capital reserves or in our fund balance may not be completely right with me.
So what I heard Tony say was that the flexibility that we have with other funding sources is what satisfied the bond folks, that we were okay with 19 million.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll remind you, I think you all remember this, but our policy says we have to have a reserve of 5%, which a budget of 267 million is 13.4. So we have to have 13.4 by policy. So this is the lowest fund balance that I've seen, and I think it's great. I think what we did was smart. We went right up to the limit. Bob was telling us, I wouldn't go any further. So I think we're right where we should be. And I think it was good to use that money. I mean, our friend Wendy Thomas used to always look at our fund reserve and say, this is too much. We should spend this money. And I think we're now at a good place.
But if the S&P is looking at us and questioning $19 million, then I question what they're doing.
But we could have left it in fund balance and there wouldn't have been a question.
No, maybe,
It comes down to when the call happens. Do they typically call us in the spring every year, or did we call them?
Well, this is related to the bond issue.
Right, yeah, so they're seeing it.
Yeah.
I mean, since we're going to have another bond next year for the renovations, I would say we have to keep the balance close to like between 19 and 22, right? Just in case we don't lose our rating.
It depends on, I don't want to say it has to be between 19 and 22 to keep the rating, because I don't know that that's fair. But I would like to, I think there's also more that goes into this than just
The end of
our
the story is
bond
we
rate.
kept it, right? The end of the story is we kept it.
Yeah, we're
right?
fine.
So.
Yeah, they asked, we gave them a good answer, and we're fine. I mean, and we're using the money.
If we get into the position where we start spending money, that we don't have, or we start spending money that we're not bringing in, then next year, we have to deal with that same amount of money. And then the following year, we have to deal with, it's gonna, and all of a sudden now we have a $19 million fund balance, and we're using $5 million to
Run the district.
Services, then the following year, we have to find, either cut that 5 million or spend another 5 million, and plus whatever other increases we might have.
Yeah, and that's what Bob was trying to explain to us last time, that we can easily use that money for things that are carrying the budget.
I got it. It was very obvious.
He told us, I agree.
So I have to be careful. So what would you like to see for for meeting next week? I mean, we already asked the administration some questions. Are there any other specific things that you would like to see?
I gotta go. So I've said it numerous times, I need to see 5-year projections. I would assume that we're already in the hole for the next budget. So that's got to be in my mind, what that looks like, building itself out. Other districts are doing projections of almost 10 years. I can't expect. Going to roll that out. The one nice thing that we have in place, we have our labor contracts, we have our transportation contracts. Those things are fixed. So pushing a projection out, I'm not saying it's not easy or hard, but I'd like to see that by the next time. I would just say that this screen does not mean anything to me, because the one thing I did not hear is cuts. The other thing that I'd like to see from the administration in a pecking order is the things that you threw on the table that you quickly rolled back that you didn't want, or are not a part of this budget. For instance, security guards, math specialists. I'd like to see where they rank, how important they are to the administration, and can we exchange something? Is there a way of, if we're capped at the number of staff, we're capped at where we are, is there a way of moving things around? My concern is that we are going to close this budget with whatever type of increase or not, or whatever. We're going to have a problem next year, and the problem's going to continue down the line.
That's right.
I think when you asked about the curriculum questions, Mike, you're asking for a curriculum review.
Yeah.
And I've asked for that for 2 years now. So it's not a shot at anybody, but for me, this is where we are right now. You can close the gap by any of these options. I don't think that's good enough.
What you'll find out after a while is, we want this new program, okay, we get this new program, but we never shed any of the old programs, ever. They just keep lingering on and on. And we've reached a point in the budget, if I'm reading it right, where, if you want this, you're gonna take something out. That's all. Or be more efficient with how you deliver it, either one,
Well, subbing it out at least gets you, we're not losing much.
You're not losing,
You're just flipping it through, and I look at menus of restaurants. I can't get the food that I wanted 3 years ago. They're not doing it no more. And I think public education
No,
has to
I have a
realize.
couple of items that I would like to review. And I can talk to you about that. The thing is that we have to close it within like a month or two more, so.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see the numbers that
Yeah,
we're
I would
at.
like to see the healthcare account, the expenses, whether we can go to a different provider and reduce costs in the long term. Because the consortium, they said they saved $84 million since 2012. And I know the administration has looked at that, but it was like 2014, right? Maybe things have changed since then, and down the road, we can cut significant costs. The other question that I have is, I know the Bucks IU, they offer special ed services. Are there things we can do through them that would cost less than what we have now? and still, of course, keep the quality. We cannot look at this, within the next month or two, but I would like us, if you agree, long-term, to look at this. Just same thing with the curriculum. I mean, definitely. I just don't know how much we can do in the next month or two. So let's keep that in mind.
So just like we talked about, I asked Matt to do some work with Chromebooks. I asked Anthony to do the same with at least one of our special ed programs and compare what it costs us to run it versus what it would cost us if we were to outsource to the IU. So both those gentlemen are working on that. Go ahead.
And if I could just follow up with that also, Andy, at one time, we received many services from the IU. Speech and language gifted program was done through the IU. And over a period of years, we went through what's called transfer of entities and brought those programs in-house at a much more cost-efficient rate, and with an improvement in some intangible areas like making those people part of the Council Rock family. So I don't know what that would look like now, but we went through a period of doing that previously, and I thought, for me, quite successful.
And to that point, there's not a reverse transfer of entity.
That's right.
And so Christine would be the one to be the expert in that area. But at that time, when we as a district went through that, the philosophy was it was real important for our children to be in our schools being taught by our teachers. And so I don't know what Anthony's analysis is going to indicate on that, but again, that was the philosophy at that time. I still believe our kids are best taken care of being here with our teachers in our buildings. And then, of course, then you have to add the special ed law onto that, and we just can't arbitrarily move students. And go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, so thank you. So, right, so once our bargaining unit owns a position, we can't give that up. So for the speech. Now, I am doing trends for Andy as we're speaking, and I'm going to do a mini program review, if you will, to see what our practices have been over the 5 years, work with some representatives from ASHA who oversee speech therapy. There's a difference between speech therapy in school than there is in the medical side. So I'm going to see what are our practices here in Council Rock and see if there's any efficiencies. So I'm definitely looking at that. I'm working with, Andy's asked me to work on that, and I will get you some more information on that. But to go back to the intermediate unit for speech, once that TOE, transfer of entity, had occurred, we can't reverse it.
So I just want to understand that better. So, and not right now.
Okay.
But down the road, I would
Okay.
like maybe to sit down and understand. And I know you have a lot of history, but part of being relatively new on the board and me being a numbers person and hearing that their services are like cost less, I just want to compare and see, maybe run an analysis. I'm not saying that we are not going to keep it as it is, but it's good every few years to just check and see, are we cost effective? I mean,
You can't think out of the box if you won't get out of the box, is what you're saying.
Right.
Because we've always done it this way is a terrible way to think, so.
But we haven't always done it this way.
Yeah, but.
We haven't.
But we've done it for a long time, so let's look at it, that's all. And not just this, everything.
everything.
I'm not
Like the
fixated
healthcare
on this.
expenses.
And we're committed to that. You heard me say earlier, we're talking with every vendor and so on. One of the things also, I mean, there are so many moving parts right now, but we know at this juncture, we have 143 cyber students, cyber charter students. And we're working on a way to personally contact those 143 students to see how we get them. I mean, that's a revenue stream. And if we can't get them back there, how can we service them at a better rate? It is nearly $16,000 of taxpayer money to fund one cyber charter student if they're a regular ed student, and it's nearly $45,000 of taxpayer money to fund a cyber charter student if they're a special ed student, right? So we know that if we can capture that, even if we could reduce that by 25%, that these numbers start looking a little bit different.
Andy, I know I asked you before, I don't know where you're at with this, but I'll do it for the rest of the board. One of the things that Dr. Sanko and I talked about the other day was where are those numbers in the grade breakdown? Because what we saw during the pandemic, is it still true, are those kids really at the end of the high school and then we're not seeing it on the back end? Will we just through attrition almost see the money back? I don't know. That's
So,
something I
so
have-
right now, that analysis is laying right in the middle of the table in my office. There are 22 students currently in 12th grade. Don't ask me 11th, 10th, 9th, I don't have them memorized, they're on my table, but there are 22 students that are in 12th grade. If those 22 students graduate and move on, and we're able to capture the kids at the kindergarten, first grade level, that's a 22 student savings. Now, I can't tell you whether that's the $15,000 or $16,000 savings or the $45,000 savings at this moment, but we do know if we can encourage our families to come to us and not a cyber charter school, that's a revenue stream we will realize and not be pushing out to cyber charter schools. And again, much like contracting services, we believe strongly that we take the best care of our students and we want them in our buildings.
Do we have any data that we could use to support that, to encourage them, that the education in our buildings with our teachers?
Yeah, our first step is going to be a personal contact. What's going well, what's not going well, what are you looking for? We're working on a script so that when we break this 143 number up across ourselves, that we get some consistency and record first attempt contact, second attempt notes.
Great.
Yeah.
what were we, do you know what we were at? We were at about 100 kids. 100 kids
We tip
pre-pandemic?
pre-pandemic, and this number is loose, so I know we're being recorded, but don't write this in pen. We were somewhere around 62, I believe, pre-pandemic. We tipped the scales at 200 plus.
Right.
At some point, we're currently at 143. As of the day that we ran that report, and when did I share that with you? Monday, Tuesday?
Maybe yesterday.
Yesterday, 143. 22 of whom are in 12th grade.
I just want to thank everybody, not just you, Tony, everybody for the work that they've done from the last finance meeting to now to have this number, almost a third less as to where it was. I heard a lot of good things tonight. I always think communication is a big thing, and I was glad to hear, Dr. Sanko, when you said that, there is going to be communication between, people that are running the things and to you and to the finance office and back and forth, so that, like you use the term suspender, so there's better communication, so we know where we're at, so hopefully we don't get surprised in the future, and nobody does for that matter. A couple other points that I heard, like you mentioned something about like not cutting stuff. I don't want to, I don't want to see programs cut for kids. I don't want, anything that has to do with the education. I like the idea when you said, maybe get a couple security guards in there or another special ed. What are the things that really that instead of cutting that maybe we should add, even though it's going to add to that budget, that number might go up a little bit, but maybe it's worth it. Obviously we're not going to be able to make wholesale changes or things going forward, like you said, Jonah, but it is a part of it. And now that you have administrators looking at things more intently, maybe over the course of the next 6 months, there will be savings that we can get. Like I said, I was really pleased to hear a lot of the things that I said. Hopefully, what's going to happen between now and June, I don't know, where it's going to go and what's going to be the outcome. But, I at least think we're heading in a good direction to get some stability going forward after we pass this budget, so we don't keep on running into this problem year after year after year. And I just want to thank everybody, for the work that they've done so far, and hopefully we can bring this home in a couple months.
Well, thank you for that, and I would just like to extend that thanks to all of our principals, our curriculum coordinators, our special ed folks, because we have been nonstop sitting down with those people line item by line item, looking for those things as small as $65 to as big as whatever it is. And our mantra since the start of this, because we have met with all the administrators multiple times. We've met with the CRESPA and CREA Association presidents. It's very important for us to keep focused on the students and not impact the students. The kids deserve the best, the very best. And everything we're doing, we're trying to do that as far away from people as we can. I mean, we're in the people business. Mr. Hidalgo mentioned inflation. That's impacting all of us, our seniors, everybody around this table, everybody in our district. We know we have some fixed costs that with some contracts, but we're being as mindful with every one of those things as we can. And I just want to echo, Mr. Hickey, what you said. I couldn't be more proud of the work that our folks have done since we sat in front of you and said, here's $16 million, including a wish list. Now we're at this number, but we know we have a lot of work to do yet.
Any other requests or comments?
I echo those positive comments, since we're without having to repeat again, so, again, thank you.
I just had one request. Is the spreadsheets that you currently have, like summaries, are they disseminated to the board, like more detailed, like as far as revenues and that type of thing? It's not ready, it's not.
It's not ready. We have some calculating, we're waiting for things to figure out exactly what accounts are going to change in that. So we're working on it. We spent a couple hours today, Cheryl and I working on getting that ready. So she's working on it. We call it the budget book so that we can get that to you as soon as possible. On that note, beyond your comment, back to your question, I'm sorry. I am working on the 5-year projection. I will have a phone call with the vendor who is helping me learn it early next week, and I do plan to have something available for you for the next meeting to see, and what I'd like to show is, where we stand with in upcoming years with I would like to lay out some, if this is what you're looking for, it's a variety of scenarios where, including, tax increase this year, and seeing where that takes us in the future. And so I think that's what you're looking for. I don't want to waste your time sitting here and tell you a bunch of information that you don't care about.
And I asked for a projection, just a projection for this year where we're going to end. And I think Tony said he's still working on that, so he did. If you have anything, I mean, we understand it's not going to be final. If you have any kind of projection, we have a lot.
Your best prediction, yes. Right. Prediction is what
A prediction.
I can give you a projection, and I'm going to tell you, you can't laugh at me when I'm wildly off.
You get a break because you're.
Well, no, I don't. It's really tough to do. I mean, you have. So just to give you an example and an idea, you have. If I looked at our revenue versus expenses right now, we're ahead by $39 million because obviously our revenues come in much faster than our expenses. And keep in mind now we've still got 4 payrolls left in this year that we have to. We still have revenue coming in. I mean, we get the majority of our revenue comes from, but we have that revenue by January, most of it. But we don't, our expenses come in at a slower pace throughout the year. So, the problem is I can try to predict where things are going to come, where they're going to be, but I can't. There are so many moving parts that the best projection I can give you right now, and this is probably very wrong, is about $1.5 million surplus. $1 to $1.5 million.
But that's a beautiful, as you said, guess. The revenue, the cost of the cost for payroll is pretty predictable.
Yes.
But then there's some other very much unknown outliers out there that you can't.
Another outlier that's there right now is the earned income tax. Usually a lot that increases as the year comes to a close, but but I don't know what rate is gonna increase. I can tell you, you know, what we budgeted. You know, in '22, we received, in '22, we received $22 million, which was well below what we budgeted. In '23, it's very hard to predict. And I feel like that's another one of those things, though, that came out of the pandemic. Because remember, the '22 was significantly higher because of all the people that worked in Philadelphia that were working from home, so they weren't paying that tax in Philadelphia, and they were paying it to us. You know, I feel like that's going to diminish every year as people go back to working in the office and go back to the city where we don't get their earned income tax. But I would like more information before I feel like I could answer that question better next year. If you were asking the same question at the same time next year, I can give you a better answer. But that the pandemic has thrown so many of these numbers out of whack that it's hard to be able to predict it. And I think eventually we'll settle into an EIT where we're getting a little bit of growth every year. But right now, that's a really hard number to predict. And that's just one example of some of the reasons why. You know, if we end up with $22 million, we're in great shape. But
The only thing I wanted to suggest is for you, when you're doing your 5-year projections, take a look at some of the projections we got from the people that did the software before, and you'll see some really interesting projections that maybe you as an accountant with that background will be able to like, okay, I won't go there. Because you could see that, you know, you can just, 5 years, you could see a negative $30 million fund balance, you know, when you just a couple of clicks of a keystroke. Yeah. You probably don't want to see that.
Well,
You think we're done? Can I ask for if there's a public, oh, I'm sorry, you want to say something?
I think Mr. Tate had something.
I was just going to say, thanks everybody for your long hours and hard work. I know you've been working late and putting in an extra effort, so thank you. Thanks a lot.
Before we go, please say, do you have the?
Yeah, I'm still living up in Makefield. I'm just here to gather information, but I do appreciate Mr. Dongo's concern for our senior citizens. My teacher's pension has not increased 1 penny in 20 years.
Yeah.
My bills have spiraled 500 or so%. So thank you. But also Pennsbury is also absorbing what do you call it? Marsa. So they're considering building a whole new school or adding one of those. Very well. But thank you.
That makes sense. Just real quick,
Sure.
Dr. Senko, if I could, do you guys have direction? Because I'm not so sure you do, going into the next one.
The direction that I think we have is Mr. Roosevelt asking for a comparison with courses. I heard a direction for Tony to provide some examples with these percentage of increases associated with possible use of fund balance is the second thing I heard. And
as long as you have your wish list.
Yeah. Oh, and the wish list.
Prioritize.
And the 5-year projections?
I have that 5-year projections. The IU comparison for the special ed program, and then the list of staff we as cabinet gathered from you, from teachers, from parents, and things that we would like to have and believe it would be a benefit, including math specialists, security guards, data analysts.
In ranked order.
In rank order.
Along with the finishing of all the stuff that you guys are
With everything else. Finish the school year, Keystones.
PSSA is well underway.
Yeah.
Keystones are around the corner.
I think that's it.
All right, we're done. So see you all next
week.
No.
No.
All right.